All right, Steeler fans, welcome back. Second half of the show on Friday. It's time for the All Betz Are Off segment with Jerome Betz. What's up, Jeremy? How's it going?
Hey man, not doing too bad. Squealed in after work today to get this one in, and it's gonna be fun. Let's talk some Steelers.
Let's talk some Steelers. Now, I don't know if you listened to Wednesday's podcast, but I'm trying to coincide these podcasts with Brian Davis's articles on SteelCurtainNetwork.com, which is essentially looking at free agents that are going to be available at specific positions. Wednesday was wide receivers. I'm sorry, Thursday was running backs. Tuesday was wide receivers. I talked about the wide receivers on Wednesday. So let's talk about running backs because the wide receiver market is, well, it's expensive. Like if you're going to get a big name receiver, you're going to pay some money. And the running backs, though, when you look at the expected amounts, which might be a little south, they might not be as accurate as you would think. There are still some players out there that I think the Steelers should entertain bringing in. But first, let me ask you about Najee Harris.
Yeah.
There are reports, Jerry Dulac of the Post-Gazette most notably, who said the Steelers are considering trying to bring him back. How do you feel about that?
I personally think that the relationship between the Steelers and Najee Harris has run its course, no pun intended, for what they're wanting out of the running back position. And it's not that he hasn't been a good player for them, a reliable player for them, and a good teammate, good in the locker room, any of that stuff. I don't have a problem with Najee at all, other than I just think the Steelers, fans specifically, but I think the Steelers too recognize that they're going to need some more explosiveness out of their backfield. If they want to be a run first team, which I truly do believe they want to be that under Arthur Smith, it's why he was brought in for his ability to coordinate running games and build this offense around that play action passing type game based on the running game. I think the Steelers need more explosiveness there. And Najee Harris just isn't that kind of back. He's a grinder. He's 2 yards in a cloud of dust guy, and he'll break one every now and then. He's physical, a better pass catcher than you might give him credit for. But it's just one of those things where the fit with the Steelers, I think, has run its course, and the Steelers are going to be looking for something else. That's just my personal opinion on it.
So before we talk about specific players, let's assume, because I said this in the first half and I stand by it, restricted free agents rarely ever leave because there's just so many different levels, whether they put a tender on them and whether they put a right of first refusal, all that stuff. So let's assume Jaylen Warren will be back for 2025. What style of back are you looking for if you're looking outside the organization? Let's not talk draft yet. Let's focus on free agency. What kind of running back are you looking for?
So Jaylen Warren specifically is a unique type of running back in that he's smaller. He's the kind of the third down back, but he's not necessarily a breakaway speed guy either. He's more of a power bowling ball back. He's good balance, likes to make contact, bounces off of contact, likes to run between the tackles. And so I think you still have that aspect to this offense, even without Najee Harris. So the running back type that I'm looking for is a guy who can break it open down the field. I need somebody who's got elite speed, who in the type of zone read schemes that the Steelers are going to want to run under Arthur Smith, where the blockers are getting out in front and creating space in lanes, where it's not a man-to-man type blocking situation. You don't have necessarily a guy you're assigned to. It's more like go fill the space and whoever's there, take care of it. Right. You need a guy who can take advantage of slim holes and make quick decisions and get through those. And to me, that's the type of running back that I would want. Somebody with quickness, somebody with speed to break it loose once they get out of there. And fortunately for the Steelers, there's a lot of those in this draft class. I don't know about the free agent class necessarily, but I think they need somebody with speed and vision to really make this thing work, because Jaylen Warren can provide the physical aspect for you already. He can be your third down pass blocker, pass catcher. He can be the pinball guy on the goal line, but you need somebody to break it open or in the middle of the field as well.
So let me ask you, when you look at the free agent crop, there's a lot of players that have big time question marks or asterisks by their names due to injury. Doesn't mean that they're coming off of an injury, but they have a history of being injured. Whether you're talking about J.K. Dobbins,
Yep.
Nick Chubb, you even bring in Javonte Williams of the Broncos, who had that really gruesome injury his first season, his rookie season, but he played almost a full allotment of games this past year. Does that play a role in your free agency in terms of where you're looking? Do you look at past injury history? Does that give you any hesitation or pause?
A little bit, but not as much as it would if we didn't have Jaylen Warren probably coming back. So because he's a guy who also has proven to be able to stay on the field for the most part. I think did he miss 2 games this last season? I can't remember.
2 or 3 because he had the knee and then the hamstring.
Yeah. So a little bit of injury cropped up this last year, but nothing crazy. You've got a guy who can do the things we've talked about and who you know very well already. So to me, taking a swing on a guy like a J.K. Dobbins or a Nick Chubb makes sense, especially at the price you could probably get them for, because neither one of those guys are going to command a huge number, and you can supplement it in this very, very deep draft class with a guy who can be your RB3 and potentially turn that into an RB1 spot if the veteran you bring in doesn't work out or the injury history is a problem. I would take a flyer on a J.K. Dobbins because he's still young. He's a year removed from his major injury, and I know he had some injuries to deal with this last season as well. But I think he's got something left in the tank. If the question mark with him only has been, can he stay healthy? Nick Chubb now the same thing, but I think he's maybe lost a step from what he was even a couple years ago. So the age factor there plays into it based on how you want to proceed. But the fact that you can get with a very deep draft class, a running back who can contribute as a rookie, and you have Jaylen Warren already, I would be just fine going after a guy with an injury history that's got some upside.
Any other free agent players that jump out at you? I know a player that's everyone's talking Aaron Jones, and they're all talking Najee Harris as like the cream of the crop, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm looking at like a Rico Dowdle from Dallas, who actually, I thought he played well this past season. Played in 16 games. He averaged 4.6 yards an attempt, over 1,000 yards rushing, 249 receiving yards. Yeah. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money either. And so what do you think about a player like that? Are there any other names that do stick out to you?
Yeah, he makes sense. And he was underrated in Dallas and would be a good complement to anybody. I don't think he's a guy you're bringing in as like necessarily a 1-2 punch with Jaylen Warren. You're going to want a little bit more upside than that, I think. Yeah. But if I were to go deeper down the line here, what about a guy like Jordan Mason, who stood out in a very good way when Christian McCaffrey missed time this last season for San Francisco? And it's the same type of zone run scheme. He's shown a clear ability to hit holes well and have good vision. He's a guy that wouldn't cost you much. He's a restricted free agent though. So if he were to return to San Francisco, obviously that's off the board. But I also look, let's see here. I also look at a guy like just saw Cam Akers, who played for Minnesota this last year. He's still only 26 years old by the time the season starts. And he had an injury, but he came back and was pretty explosive for the Vikings in short stints when Aaron Jones wasn't playing. And I think he could be a guy that could fill in as with RB1 duties or be part of a combo back feature that could provide you some of that speed and explosiveness that you're missing.
So you mentioned also that this draft class does have a very deep crop of running backs. I don't, especially if the Steelers go out and sign, they assume they bring back Jaylen Warren. Let's just say they sign a running back in free agency. I really don't want, unless it's Jainty from Boise State. I don't even know if that's a direction people would want to go in round 1, but I would say, like, can you give me an early day 3 player who could be an impact player and maybe a lesser known guy? It doesn't have to fall into all those criteria, but who are some running backs people should be keeping their eye on?
Yeah, there's a lot, and you've got guys that have different qualities. I think if you were to look at this year's draft class, it's probably the deepest running back class ever that I can remember. And I want to say that there's probably 25 guys that are worth worth being drafted by the end of round 4. And that's a crazy number of guys. There's a few that have some upside further down the way as well. But you look at a guy like Ollie Gordon, who is kind of a second, third round player who's got some upside. He's a bigger back. He weighed in pretty heavy actually at the combine, or not the combine, the Senior Bowl at 233 pounds. He's 6'1", but when this guy gets out in open field, he's got long strides and is actually really fast. And he's a good one-cut runner, but he's got some power as well. And he can lose some of that weight if the Steelers would want him to, much like Le'Veon Bell did. And there's reminiscent skill sets with those two guys. I think of I'm gonna butcher his first name, so I'm not gonna even say it, but Tutin is the last name, and he's kind of a smaller back. He's like 5'9", very shifty in the hole. He's kind of Ashton Genty light, if you will, not the high profile nature of his game, but he's got a lot of similar characteristics. So whichever way you want to go with that, but even a guy like Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, my Buckeyes, this is a second or third round guy, most likely, that could be a big time add. And he's actually like the perfect fit for what I would like in a running back to come to Pittsburgh. Elite speed, quickness in the hole, but also some size to where you're not going to be worried about workload with this guy. He would be a fantastic fit. He's my favorite fit for the Steelers, not just because I'm a Buckeyes fan.
I think for me, like, this is a position that is very intriguing because, you look at wide receiver, you're going to have to get wide receiver help. Like, it's going to have to come in probably more than one way. But running back, well, like, if you go out and get yourself a decent running back and you bring back Jaylen Warren, do you need to take a day 2 running back? Or do you say we have to address the defensive line and the offensive line if there's a position that you feel like you need to address there? Do they look into the secondary, like the slot corners? Because I know that this cornerback crop is pretty good as well in the upcoming draft. Do you think running back is a position that would actually propel itself all the way up to be a day 1, day 2 draft pick?
Yeah, it will depend on free agency to a point with the offensive line, I think, and how comfortable you feel that you've addressed things like wide receiver and defensive tackle. But because there are definitely bigger needs. But running back is a pretty strong need for this team, despite its relative lack of priority in recent years by teams. I mean, look at what Philadelphia just did by adding an elite running back. Look at what the Ravens were able to do this year and exercise some of their demons against the Steelers with a back like Derrick Henry and taking some of the weight off of Lamar Jackson in the running game. And so it changes the ball game to have a really good running back. And I just pulled up the list here just to look at some other names, but I'm looking at guys that could be impact players in year 1 as a rookie that you can get that are like the 20th and 25th running backs off the board. Guys like Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech, Trevor Etienne out of Georgia. He's the 25th ranked running back on PFF's big board. And so he's got a lot of players in front of him, but this is a guy with a lot of speed, a lot of explosiveness, and he could be there for you whenever you want him to be on day 3. Donovan Edwards out of Michigan. There's so many guys in this draft, Jeff. I think the Steelers will take one, and they don't need to feel pressed to do so to get an impact player.
It's going to be interesting, man. The new league year is coming up quick, and we're going to see what the Steelers do in free agency, which will always dictate the needs and stuff like that for the draft. But Jeremy, what's coming up for you? What do you got cooking?
Yeah, man, I'm working through my series on wish lists for each NFL team. All 32 teams just came out with the NFC East a little bit ago, and we're going to do the AFC East next, and we'll try to do a couple of those a week all the way into the start of the new league year here. And that's going to be on the written side. And then as far as podcasts go, we're hitting draft talk hard and heavy on the Draft Dynasty podcast. The Steelers Fix, we're talking about all of the offseason stuff as well. We just did our defense free agency frenzy look. And so check all those out on the podcast side. Follow me on Twitter too at the Betz93 THEBETZ93.
Love it, man. Thanks for your time as always. Enjoy your weekend. We'll talk next week.
Have a good one, Jeff.